Welcome back. This is part two of my first kit build, also an entry to the Great Guitar Build Off. Today we're going to work on gluing the neck and routing the cavity for the bridge. This is my first time using most of these tools, so hopefully things go all right. All right, so I got the neck in and I'm just kind of looking at the height right now to make sure that nothing's going to go too awry with our bridge. I'm going to go ahead and sand the neck pocket just a little bit to make sure that the neck will actually go in there once I add glue. I've been having trouble getting it in and out, and I just really want to make sure when the glue hits that wood that I'm ready to go. All right, so now that we've got the neck in there, it feels like it's going to go in well. I'm going to go ahead and take one of the clamps I'm going to use, put it on there to make sure it will reach, to make sure that it's not going to move once I put that extra bit of force on it, so that that neck angle doesn't suddenly change on me. And it looks like we're good so far. Normally you would definitely want to use a caul of some sort here. Those are brand new pads on that. It's a brand new clamp. Now we're taking some sandpaper, just cleaning it up, giving the glue a really good surface to stick to. I'm also going to go through and clean up the edge here. I just noticed it was a little torn up. Not too badly, but enough that I wanted to get it right before I have a neck in there, and it's going to be much, much more difficult. So now I'm pulling the neck back out. Going to go ahead and get our glue, and promptly realize that there's no paper towel up here, so we'll run downstairs. We're back with a Chipotle napkin because that's all that I could find. Now I'm going through and cleaning out the slot for the wires going in there. That was a little messy, as I pointed out in the last video. Again, that's going to be much more difficult to do once the neck's in. I'm glad I remembered it at this point. While I'm at it, I will go ahead and clean up the other slots. And we're ready. So putting a little glue in there, wiping it around, trying to get good, even coverage. Make sure I get it up the sides, and the neck is in. Chipotle napkin has come in handy so far. I'll sit here and fidget around with the clamp a little bit, just trying to make sure that I get it on there. Now that I've got it seated, we're kind of looking at the glue squeeze out, getting as much as we can wiped off just to prevent work later. Again, fidgeting around with the clamp a little bit, just in trying to get it on there. I don't think I had it quite tight enough. And get the last bit of glue, and we're good. So now we're back, clamp is off, neck is set. So right now I'm going through finding the center of the neck again, just to be safe, double checking our scale length. So this was 25.5 inch scale length. So what I've done is I've measured 12 and 3/4 inches from the 12th fret. Right now, again, I'm double checking our center line, marking out where I think the bridge is going to go. So I've put it into the little caps to make sure it'll stand still for me. Double checking that, again, we are dead center, or as dead center as we are going to get. Checking both sides, checking the size of that. At this point, I realized that the easiest way to get these drill holes started was actually going to be using the bridge itself. There are two spiky little spots there. I've gone through, adjusted them out enough just so that I can put a good spot in there for the drill to catch onto, finding the center, and we're finally making some sawdust. This maple was definitely not something that I or my cheap drill bits was quite ready to work with. Right now I'm going through and just trying to get the spots marked out a little bit, and then we'll go back through and deepen them. So right now I'm going to go ahead and take some tape, mark out exactly how deep I want to go. Hopefully I won't have an issue with this. And as you can see, it's going pretty well. Definitely a good start. As you can see there, I tried to seat the thimbles in. The bit I had was just a little bit too small, so we may have to come back and do some work on those, but for now I think we'll be good. So next you can see the template I made. So I found a basic Jazzmaster template online and just cut it out, but as you can see, this bridge isn't a normal Jazzmaster. I tried to go ahead and cut a different one out, but it didn't quite come to the size I wanted to, so we're just going to use the one I had and try to block off that little cutout there. So right now I'm trying to eye up with our holes to see where it's going to sit, make sure we're not too close, but also make sure that we don't end up accidentally blocking one of our holes back there that will likely be one of the pots or the pickup selector. So you can see, again, just kind of double checking, making sure where that's going to hang over, seeing how much play I've got in there. That's the good thing about choosing this Jazzmaster trim, is that there's probably about 1/4 to 1/2 an inch per side of error that I have. So you can see, again, measuring it out, double checking. A little nervous at this point. You could probably call this procrastination. Now I'm squaring up that edge just a little bit. Again, probably procrastination. But looks good. We're sat on there. So now we're going to grab our double stick tape that I picked up just for this. Struggling a little bit to get it off, but there we go. Just cut a couple pieces off, and then we'll pull the backs off and stick it on there, hopefully right where we want it. So now I've got the pieces off. Wishing I had some sort of square to make this just a little bit easier, but was able to draw a surprisingly straight line. So again, just double checking to make sure that that line is in the dead center. All right, so I put a center line on the template. Now we're just making sure that I can line it up, that everything looks all right. This is just kind of the moment of truth, trying to make sure that I've got everything exactly where I want it before I start trying to route this out. As I mentioned, this is my first time using a router of any sort. So I pressed it down, tried to make sure our double stick tape has got it. Now I'm going through with a ruler and just really trying to double check off of that center line we've got. Make sure we've got the same amount on both sides. Try to get this as dead center as I can. And it wasn't quite where I wanted it, so now we're going to go ahead and lift it up. And much to the credit, this double stick tape is holding it down quite well. And there it is. Anyone want to ask me how my day's going? So we're going to go ahead and pull the other side off. Probably stare at it for a second or two. At this point, the best idea is probably going to be to just make a new template. I should have either used a thicker material or at least a more dense material. This was not exactly the right stuff to make a template, but we're going to go ahead and piece it back together and throw it on there. I'm hoping with how strong that tape proved to be that this will go back on well. Obviously, I've got a little bit of scrap wood now stuck to it, but on the bright side, it looks like we're getting it back to where I wanted it to go. Just pressing it down really well, trying to see if it's going to move, if it's going to shake, rattle. Again, double checking that it's actually centered. So because I don't trust this, I'm going through and marking it out with a pencil, just in case for some reason I would have to go through and try to piece something back together around it. So now we're starting to drill out and realizing that my drill is dead. So we got a good charge back on it. At this point, I'm also really wishing I had stopped to get a Forstner bit. Sadly, I was COVID positive during most of the filming of this, so going out to get a random tool or supply just wasn't happening. So we're just kind of making do with what we've got. You can see it's a bit of a struggle, and at this point, about 2 holes in, I'm starting to wonder if it's going to be worth it, especially with how hard that maple is. I think if this had been something else, it may have gone a little bit better. But for the time being, I will let you guys watch me struggle with this drill, trying to get at least a little bit of wood routed out of this. Because of how big of a cavity I'm trying to make, I really don't want to just plunge into this with a router and risk tearing something out. So you can also see, once I sit it back down, I've taped things together a little bit and actually added 2 pieces of wood on there just to straighten things out again, and block off that spot where the spring would go on a normal Fender Jazzmaster bridge. You can see right now I was starting to worry a little bit about how much that was flopping around, so I've taped it down. Still struggling with the drill. Again, maple is very hard, and drill bits from Lowe's are not really meant to go through it. All right, so at this point, I go ahead and stop and just try to get a couple more of these drilled out. You can see I got a little ways and gave up. I've added another piece of, or I've actually added the old template in under it just to try to give the router something even to ride on. So I'm actually not even starting with a pattern bit. I've got a very small bit in here just to try to get myself a good little pocket to start on, and then start using a proper pattern bit to get a little bit closer. Also, just to give myself a little bit of a practice run. Nothing too bad so far. The only thing I didn't think about when I was doing this was that I was going to need a way to get all of that dust out of the pocket without having to unclamp it every time. You can see a little bit of burnt wood there on the bottom, but on the bright side it matches the pickup cavities. So still working with just a plain, I think it's a double flute bit, trying to get a good hunk of material removed in the center. Again, you can see a little bit more burnt wood. Probably a little bit of smoking at this point, but nothing crazy. Also double checking our depth here to make sure I haven't gone too far. At this point, I have switched to a proper pattern bit, and I'm starting to get just a little bit closer to the template itself. So because of how much material we have, this is slow going. You can see I'm still burning it out a little bit, but trying to be controlled. At this point, there is a beeping in the background that is my smoke alarm. Apparently just the faintest puff of smoke and they just start going off like crazy. You can see I'm running over, fanning it out, running over, fanning it out. Just trying to get the job done at this point. Now, as you can see, looks like we've got it most of the way out, and it looks like I had a little bit of an issue with the pattern. I could try to clean this out, but I'm also a little bit afraid of getting too close to the electronics cavity and having a big hole in the front. Again, luckily with this Jazzmaster trim, we did have some room for error, so I think I'm going to leave it as is. Right now I'm finding out that the double-sided tape I used probably wasn't meant for this purpose. Trying to peel it off with a razor blade, get what I can out of there. Now in this you can also see that I've gotten into the hollow cavity there on the upper wing. Luckily though, plenty of room there for the spring itself to sit on. Right now I'm getting a chisel just to try to clean out a little bit of a spot that I didn't quite get to. I've basically called it quits with the router for right now. I think I've done enough damage. Chiseling went pretty well though, cleaned up no problem. You can see where I slipped through a little bit on the front through that piece of wood that was taped down. So now we're going to go ahead and grab our bridge and try to make sure that it fits in there, that we don't have any gaps at the back. Just kind of final decision on what I'm going to do with this pocket. Luckily everything covered up fine. It even looks like I may be able to get away without recessing a spot for this to ride on and sit flush. There might be a slight angle, but I think it will either not really be noticeable or it will just kind of add to the effect of the carve. So next I'm going to go ahead and drop the bridge in there and grab a ruler just to make sure that the holes all line up and there's nothing wrong with this. This is kind of my last chance to maybe widen that pocket one way or another to sit that just right. I'm also seeing about how it's going to sit over the fretboard and what my brake angle is going to look like. I'm hoping having that sitting back just a little bit, it's actually going to help me as well. Alright, so there it is. it's starting to look more like a guitar. Hope to see you guys back for part 3. We'll be cleaning up the electronic cavity and getting ready for finish.